Good morning, dear friends. Sorry for the slight delay, technical hitch. Also apologies that Ayya Palaniani is not with us this morning. I'm standing in for her. What an honour. And what I've done is I brought a teaching along from the Pali Canon to use as a springboard for this morning's contemplation. And I really personally love to start every day with a sutta study. First meditate and then look at some teachings. And the attitude I have to the teachings is one of simply receiving and not trying to make anything of anything, but just to allow listening to the Dhamma and then see what can be gleaned from the teaching of the day. Actually, I do this a few times every day. And so this morning I came to this sutta and I'd like to share it with you. It's actually a very famous sutta that's been used and written about so much over the centuries, because it's a very delightful, in a way, very delightful story and also very profound teaching. So welcome Manal, Charles Lee, Kit and Bhumika, and anyone else who tunes in later. We also have Savitri with us here from Germany today in the room. Welcome, Savitri. So this teaching is Alawaka Sutta. It's from Samyutta Nikaya, the main section on verses, the chapter on spirits, and this is an interaction between the Buddha and a being who would be perhaps invisible to most of us, a yaka, so a being from a different realm of existence, a kind of a spirit. Alawaka is the name of the spirit, and the spirit lived in a place called Alawi. And the Buddha visited this place, and the spirit visited the Buddha. And here's how the sutta goes. Thus have I heard. At one time, the Buddha was staying near Alawi, in the haunt of the native spirit, Alawaka. Then the native spirit, Alawaka, went up to the Buddha and said to him, "Get out, ascetic." Saying, "All right, sir," the Buddha went out. "Get in, ascetic." Saying, "All right, sir," the Buddha came back in. So I'll just pause there because this is really unusual. The Buddha was fortunately living at a time and in a place where he received a lot of respect. People were willing to listen to him and treat him in a sort of fitting way. Not everybody. People sometimes, human beings sometimes were abusive toward the Buddha, as you know, and even tried to harm him on rare occasions. But mostly, he would be, addressed in a suitable way and treated with great respect and welcomed wherever he went. How wonderful. But this spirit is very rude, very rough, using very coarse language, ordering the Buddha about. So this is very striking immediately. And what's also very apparent and very beautiful is the way the Buddha responds in a very different manner. He's simply allowing, accepting, willing to go along with the wishes of the spirit. In a way, I would say meeting the spirit, meeting him, not rejecting him or her. And so this is very touching, isn't it? The sutta goes on. For a second time, the native spirit Alavaka said to the Buddha, "Get out." Saying, "All right, sir." The Buddha went out. "Get in, ascetic." "All right, sir." The Buddha went back in again. And for the third time, the native spirit Alavaka said to the Buddha, "Get out, ascetic." Saying, "All right, sir." The Buddha left. "Get in, ascetic." And saying, "All right, sir." The Buddha came back in. So in and out, the Buddha's sitting down, getting up. And instead of leaving or simply sitting and ignoring the spirit, the Buddha responded and followed. And it's interesting, isn't it, that Alavaka didn't really want the Buddha to go away. He wanted to assert his sort of territorial rights, maybe in some way. How human, actually. How natural, in a way, even though his manner is very coarse. This is my place. You've come to my place. So he's marking his territory, asserting his sort of territorial authority. There's something one can understand in that. But he doesn't want the Buddha to go away. He's not casting him out. He actually wants him to stay, in a way, because he keeps inviting him back in. So there's an interaction here that has some relationship, something likely to shift and change, some interaction of meaning, possibly on the way. For a fourth time, the native spirit Alavaka said to the Buddha, "Get out, ascetic." The word in Pali is nikama samana. And this time, the Buddha said, "No, I won't get out. Do what you must." So something's changing. It's sort of a confrontation time. The Buddha has been very patiently acquiescing to the wishes of this spirit, to the point where some rapport, perhaps you could say, is set up. And now he's going to assert himself, some firmness, and stay sitting, stay where he is. And the spirit says, "I will ask you a question, ascetic. If you don't answer me, I'll drive you insane or explode your heart, or I'll grab you by the feet and throw you to the far shore of the Ganges." So Alavaka's not kind of calmed down. He's still very aggressively challenging the Buddha and trying to frighten him. And the Buddha responds to this in this way. He says, "I don't see anyone in this world, with its gods, its maras and brahmas, this population with its ascetics and brahmins, its gods and humans, who could do that to me. But anyway, ask whatever you wish." So perhaps this is an unusual experience for the spirit Alavaka, to be doing his big, scary, threatening act, and to have the human being quite comfortable, quite calm, quite peaceful, not afraid. So one could imagine, right, that this would be quite impactful for Alavaka. He is already wanting to engage. He wants to ask a question. And he's beginning to perhaps recognize that this is no ordinary person who's come to his haunt. This is someone very special. And this is an important opportunity for him. And as we're going to see, you know, one could say perhaps all beings are seeking Dhamma, all beings are seeking peace, truth, happiness. And we can see in this sutta how it doesn't matter in what realm you find yourself, in what situation, there is always this seed of search, of Dhamma inquiry. And so Alawaka asks his questions, her questions, and it's really quite amazing now how the whole energy, the whole atmosphere changes, because these are the questions that he asks. What is a person's best wealth? What brings happiness when practiced well? What is the sweetest taste of all? The one they say has the best life? How do they live? And so now the dialogue begins, and the Buddha can respond with the Dhamma teachings. And this is what the Buddha says. Faith here is a person's best wealth. The teachings bring happiness when practiced well. Truth is the sweetest taste of all. The one they say has the best life lives by wisdom. So here we really have the entire Eightfold Path, in a way, laid out in these simple responses. The faith that gets us on the path, the willingness to develop right view, to gain confidence in the teachings, our best wealth. These are the riches that will not flow through our hands, will not be left behind, will not break, are not insecure, right? Faith is our greatest wealth. It's here. It's something one can grow. Confidence, saddha, the willingness. It's not to believe in anything, is it? It's to test out the Dhamma, test out the teachings, test out whatever good advice we're given, and find out for ourselves how helpful, how effective, how useful. And then our faith can manifest. Our sense of direction and the confidence in that. Faith is our greatest wealth. And the Buddha said the teaching brings happiness when practiced well. How do we get happy? And this is the perennial question, isn't it? And what do we seek when we're seeking happiness? We're living in a materialist world where we are taught in ways subtle and unsubtle to find our happiness in things, in objects, in material acquisitions, possessions, the next model of this, that, or the other. You know. And we search and we struggle and we try to acquire as much as we can to get happy, to be able to feel we've succeeded in some way, to be comfortable physically. And what is the result? For so many of us, we start to realize, oh, but this isn't really a sustainable happiness. I might be happy for a moment, even for a week, even for a year with my new house or my new car. And then that happiness fades away. Someone damages my new car, or I start to feel cramped in my new spacious house and want a bigger one, and so forth. There's an encouragement to want more and more. And the wanting itself has the nature of growing. The more we want, the more we want. And so we start to recognize that happiness is not to be found in this material realm, don't we? Happiness is not to be found in samsara. There is happiness available to us. Where do we find it? And if we're fortunate enough, isn't it, to come in contact with spiritual teachings, with Dhamma, there we start to recognize is a place where we can start to feel the flowering of the heart into joy. The happiness that comes from within, that is not subject to change with external change, that isn't dependent on external conditions. We start to taste the sweet nectar of the Dhamma. And so the Buddha says, the teaching brings happiness when practiced well. And in this context, he's saying to Alavaka, isn't he, this teaching will bring you happiness if you pay attention and practice it. Truth is the sweetest taste of all. How beautiful. One of the meanings of the word Dhamma, of course, is truth, the way things are, reality, we could say. Reality is the sweetest taste of all. Truth is the sweetest taste of all. How interesting. And in this context, this spirit is playing games with the Buddha at the beginning. Go in, come out, go in, go out, come in. Playing games, not being genuinely honest. What he really wanted was an interaction like this. And all of this posturing and aggression and territoriality was not the real agenda at all. Truth is the sweetest taste. And it's very interesting to me how, you know, sometimes we sit, we meditate, and we feel like it's difficult because we're giving up so many things just in order to be still, to be willing to develop path factors such as mindfulness. We feel we're making sacrifices, but we can come to the point where we recognize, don't we, that actually being here is the most delicious experience of all, even when it's uncomfortable, even when there's physical pain, even when the emotions are roiling around and it's so unpleasant to be here with those emotions. Yet we're present. And in that presence, in that being here, in that willingness to face reality, we recognize there's a sweetness to that. Truth is the sweetest taste of all. And finally, the Buddha said, in answer, who has the best life? The one who lives by wisdom, by insight, the one who practices, in short, the one who develops spiritually, the one who learns from experience, the one who observes life rather than being swamped and overwhelmed by experience, the one who's mindful. And wisdom, of course, is the path factors of right view and right intention. It's where we set our sights. It's where we direct ourselves, how we guide ourselves in life. Wisdom, the best life, is a life lived wisely, where we give importance to wisdom, not intelligence, not knowing stuff, but understanding how to live a skillful life, which is basically, no matter what spiritual practices we have and what religions we may carry, it's basically practicing the Eightfold Path, right? Living a virtuous life, developing the mind through meditation practices, and considering the teachings, the Dharma teachings. The best life, and how blessed we are that we have this opportunity to live the best life. Let's make the most of it. And now Alavaka is absolutely present with the Buddha and receptive and learning. And he asks some more questions. He says, how do you cross the flood? How do you cross the deluge? How do you get over suffering? How do you get purified? So his heartful questions come out now. Alawaka, the spirit, who is suffering, who feels like he's flooded, feels like he's in a deluge, who's overwhelmed, and who's acknowledging that, and who's asking for help. How beautiful. This being who was ordering the Buddha about and showing his fierce, aggressive exterior starts to open up. This is the real being. This is the real inquiry. And how connecting is that? How true is that for all of us? How pertinent are these questions for each and every one of us? How do we cross the flood? How do we get out of the deluge? How do we get over suffering? How to purify? How to come out of this? The Buddha says, by faith, you cross the flood. By diligence, the deluge. By diligence, you come out of the deluge. By energy, you get past suffering, and you're purified by wisdom. So this is also so much there for us to contemplate. There's actually more of these verses, but I think I'm going to end with this verse and see if there's questions before we continue or not, because this is so rich. By faith you cross the flood. So we can really see how all the sense of overwhelm, confusion, being immersed in suffering can actually be understood, and we can chart our course through these storms with these qualities. The Buddha's already mentioned faith as the greatest wealth. And now he tells us, with this faith, with this confidence, with this willingness to open to teachings, open to the Dharma, put the Dharma into practice, we get to cross the flood. This is our way. This is our way to dry land. Diligence. We come across or through or out of the deluge through diligence. This is a kind of sense of discipline, right? A sense of being willing to keep coming back, to apply ourselves, to make this important, to give this priority, to give this path of practice the full importance that it deserves. If we want to be happy, if we want to gain wisdom, we have to make it the foremost mission of our lives, right? So to apply diligence and to bring up energy. By energy, you get past suffering. Right effort. To be willing to, isn't it, grow the virtues, to cultivate good qualities. Bring up any good qualities that we don't yet have. Recognize that. Consider the teachings and check in and see, am I generous or am I actually quite stingy? Is my training and my conditioning to hold on to stuff and to think that I need to keep it for myself in case of, some need in the future? Or am I generous? And if I'm not so generous, can I be more generous? Can I try with faith in these teachings to give away to others that which I hold dear and see how it feels? Be willing to bring up good qualities that have not yet arisen. And can I make the effort to eradicate unwholesome qualities? If I have a tendency to be snappy, irritable, can I work with that? Can I be willing to sit with how that actually feels? Sit with the remorse I may feel after I've spoken harshly. just to be present for that feeling of uncomfortable. If only I hadn't said that. And to be willing to slowly but surely face up to irritable nature and see how we can not push it away, but rather gentle it, soften it, ease out of it gradually through care, through mindfulness, through loving kindness. These are just examples. There are so many more ways in which we're doing this work, right? But just to remember, effort is required. Of course, if we put in energy, we're going to get past suffering. It's doable. And so I take this teaching really to heart, and with a lot of sense of gratitude for this being Alawaka who expressed what we all know, we all experience at times, if not most of the time, that sense of overwhelm. That sense of, yeah, well, there are these teachings, but I'm suffering so much. I don't really see how this is going to come to an end. I don't really see how I can feel better. Just to keep trying is the message, right? Just trust, allow faith, bring in that willingness to give it a go, to trust even though we haven't proven for ourselves the benefit of the Dhamma teachings, just to give them a go, and then to make the effort, be diligent and apply energy again and again and again, day after day. And slowly but surely, the message here is we can start to extricate ourselves from suffering. Often people, when they start practicing, isn't it, we imagine that it might be a quick job, got the teachings, they all make sense, I'll just practice for a while and that'll be it. I'll be an arahant and then I can continue. And then we start to realize that actually suffering is almost like an experience of layering. We'll work through one sense of deluge, sense of being flooded and overwhelmed by suffering. We see that suffering whittling away with our practice and our effort and our faith and our willingness just to keep coming back to mindfulness, face up to suffering. And we can see that whole wave of suffering pass away. Oh, what a relief, how wonderful. And then, boom, another one will come. So there's a sense of layering and a sense of journey and a sense that this is a long haul for most of us. And so these qualities of faith, energy, and diligence are so, so important for us. Not to give up, to have stamina, to sustain the practice through the whole life. So that when it comes to the end of life, or if it comes to a time even before old age where we get sick, if old age, sickness, coming close to death, when these occur for us, we're ready. And those floods, those deluges will not overwhelm us. We just keep going. So this teaching for me is profound and so, so helpful. And it's the common ground where we can all meet. We all suffer. And we can all feel overwhelmed at times. Thanks to Alawaka for this great opportunity to ask the Buddha directly, how do we work with that? And to get his response. And I'll just read his words again. By faith, you cross the flood, and by diligence, the deluge. By energy, you get past suffering, and you're purified by wisdom. So I'm going to stop here. There's one more, two more, three more, lots more questions. So if you want to read the rest of this sutta, which I highly recommend, it's Samyutta Nikaya 10, I think it's 12, 10, 12. I'm going to have a look now and see if there's any questions. Thank you all for your kind attention and your presence. Big welcomes Also to Richard, Pamela, Lalit, Jessica, Jayantha, Niranjan from Nepal. Welcome. Namo, Mark, Samashwath, Rambo from Thailand. Welcome. And we have one question here from Niranjan. Thank you. I'll just pop it up on the screen. So the question is Dhamma means natural law? Yeah, that's a good translation. It's such an extraordinary word, and there are so many nuances to this word Dhamma in the Pali language, or Dharma in Sanskrit. But certainly natural law is one meaning. So Dhamma is reality. Dhamma is also the teachings of a Buddha, because what would a Buddha teach? Only what's true and real. So how to understand reality, how to meet reality, is the whole of the Buddha's teaching. How to make sense of reality. So Dharma means truth, it means law, it means nature. The way the natural world functions is a great Dhamma teaching for us, isn't it? We see cause and effect very clearly in nature. It's very open for us. You harm nature, then there will be results. Nature will always rebalance things. So we pour fossil fuels into the environment and everything heats up. And there will be this effect that spreads throughout the system. And it's really interesting that we as human beings cannot comprehend the complexity of the workings of nature, but they will always follow the natural law of cause and effect. Something happens, there will be a result. And it's always an exactly commensurate with the action. It's really quite remarkable. A law of physics. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So we can learn from nature. We can see how this is true. Now in the human heart, it's a little bit more convoluted. And it's very difficult for us to fully understand and grasp sometimes the consequences of our thoughts, words, and deeds. But they will always follow the Dhamma. They will always follow the law. So we harm and we will suffer. Not in the future, but right now. And also, quite probably, in the future too. But right now, when we harm or hurt or act unskillfully, there is suffering. And if we really practice mindfulness and we develop our mindfulness practice, we get to feel that. So then we can start to follow the law. You know, you don't want to do that. You don't want to do anything harmful because it hurts. It's like you start to recognize, rather than putting my hand in the fire, I'm going to avoid that pain and stay away from the fire, because I've learned that if I put my hand over there, it's going to hurt like hell. But we have to learn that. And sometimes we can be so kind of overwhelmed by the deluge, so flooded by what we've learned, what we've been taught, the conditioning we have, living in our heads, that we are not in tune. We're not actually fully comprehending this law. So people can do very harmful things because they're not actually feeling the suffering that's immediately the result in them. They're not aware of it because they're looking somewhere else. They're not actually present. They're somewhere in the future planning the next harm or whatever. Or they have some ideation around that this is, yes, it is painful, but it's also necessary. This kind of ideology of, I need to do this for some future result, which will be better. But whenever we hurt or harm any other being, including ourselves, then we create suffering then and there. And future suffering will be the consequence as well. And then after the life comes to an end, there'll be a whole lot more suffering waiting for us. So, it's very sad that people do things that create so much pain and suffering in the world. But the reason they do it, we can realize, is because of ignorance. It's because they don't know what they're doing. We also get to learn very clearly when we're generous, when we're kind, when we do good, when we make effort to do good, even if the results aren't good, but we're trying to, our intention is to do good, to help and to serve. The result, of course, is happiness. As the Buddha said in this verse to Alawaka, the teachings are a cause of happiness. Yeah, we understand the teachings of the Buddha. Do good, refrain from harm, purify your heart. So to do good, when we're practicing mindfully, we get to recognize, of course, it feels good. It creates the causes for happiness. And so what do we do if we're tuned into Dhamma, the law, the nature? We just want to do good because it's natural for us to incline towards happiness. The Buddha said all things are inclining toward Nibbana. All things seek happiness, the highest happiness. And so how do we get there? We practice doing good. Good thoughts, good speech, good actions, and feel the joy of that. So this law, the Dhamma, the natural law, is so amazing to just surrender to that and to recognize that here and to be willing to feel fully what's happening now. When we feel fully what's happening now, the law, the Dhamma, is apparent to us in every moment. And doing good, avoiding harm, is natural. It's actually our nature. When we harm, we're going against our nature, and we're doing something unnatural. So these reflections on Dharma, I hope, meet your question, Niranjan, and absolutely natural law. We can contemplate this meaning of Dhamma. It's very, very useful for us. So thank you for that. We have a question from Sud. Thank you, Sud. Which is, Dear Ayya, is faith here same as right view? Not quite, but I mean, it's certainly on the same page, isn't it? Because faith is saddha, this quality. It's like a spiritual friend for us, or a power for us. It's a quality that we want to cultivate, and it's the confidence or trust in the Buddha's teachings. So it's the willingness, I would say, to take on board or to take in spiritual teachings, and then to actually, one gets the chance to then put them into practice. But first there needs to be a willingness to kind of turn towards and give energy to this, give ear to this. And faith, I would say, saddha is a quality that grows with practice, because we get some piece of Dhamma teaching and we feel, well, that sounds quite true. That sounds good. Let me apply it in my life. Let me do good. The Buddha says, do good. Okay, I'll try that. I'll really try to give much attention to how I behave and make it good. And then I get to see the results. And then when we see the results, faith is this quality of confidence in the rightness of the Dhamma. And so we take in one piece and then we'll open to another piece. So the Buddha said, purify our hearts. Okay, Alawaka's asking, how do we do that? Through wisdom. How do we develop wisdom? Look at the path factors. Wisdom is the result of practicing right view. So right view is the understanding of the fundamental truth, Dhamma, of nature, which is that there is suffering and it's due to desire. And the way out of suffering is to let go of the cause, which is desire, which is wanting or not wanting, things to be other than the way they are. So this is the actual kind of definition of right view. And of course, the other aspect of the Four Noble Truths is the path. The fourth noble truth is the eightfold path. So within right view is the entirety of the Buddha's teachings, suffering, its cause, the end of suffering, and the eightfold path. So that is, you could say, the definition of right view. And Saddha, faith, is that which inclines us towards practicing right view, testing it out, giving it time, giving it energy, and seeing the results. And so then the faith can simply grow. So I hope that answers your question, Sid. Thank you. Okay, and we have another question from Niranjan. Thank you, Niranjan. We've got Venerable Bhikkhuni. Have you attained first stage meditation, which is called Priti Sukha? Priti Sukha. I guess that's in Pali Piti Sukha. I don't really know what you mean by first stage, actually. I think in the Buddhist world we have so many different ways of approaching the teachings, and I'm thinking probably this is a Sri Lankan, correct me if I'm wrong, Niranjan, a Sri Lankan way of describing or labeling particular state of mind, first stage. You may be talking about samadhi. I guess you probably are. And that when we practice focusing, attention, developing one-pointedness of mind, we start to experience a lot of peace, a lot of bliss, which is one way of translating this word piti, rapture, bliss, a kind of delight which is almost is mental and also physical. And sukha then is the kind of softening of that rapture. It's the letting go of that intensely pleasant experience into something more calm, more peaceful, you could say more like contentment. These are all qualities of happiness. These aspects of happiness are what we can experience for ourselves when we develop meditation practice. Why? Because we're letting go of any kind of obscurations in the mind and recognizing the true nature of the mind that is uncluttered, that is free from hindrances, free from defilements, even for a moment. Have I attained? I'm not sure. I mean, I've done a lot of meditation and I've experienced all sorts of things. One thing that's really important for me is to recognize that everything's changing. And so, the most important things I've experienced through meditation practice are the understanding of anicca, impermanence, the understanding of dukkha, of what it is that creates suffering and how to let go of that, and the understanding of the impersonal nature of experience, So it's almost like in the end, we're not experiencing anything. There is Dhamma, and one can see what brings peace and one can see what brings agitation and suffering. And then the inclination is always to move towards the peaceful. And so I think this, above all for me, the quality of anicca, of change, is what I experience in meditation practice. So it's to know that, to understand, to be very conscious that whatever state of mind, whatever experience arises, such as sukha or piti or suffering or pain, or a mind that's really agitated or a mind that's very still, whatever is being experienced, it's going to change. And therefore, because this is the nature of all things, the best way forward is to recognize that and be willing just to let it change, to let go, not to hold on to anything at all. So this is a very sort of roundabout reflection, but thank you very much for bringing that question in. And I hope that was helpful. Very good. Okay, we don't have any more questions, so I may just take this opportunity to simply read you the rest of the sutta. And I won't say any more about the sutta, but I'll give you the opportunity to take it away and reflect on it yourselves. So let me see if I can find it. Where did I put it? Here it is. Actually, what I'd really like to do is to read the entire sutta from the beginning again, and we can recognize what's already been covered, what we've discussed to a small extent, and then we can hear the rest. So please allow yourselves to close the eyes, sit and meditate, be aware of the body, be aware of the breath, and give ear, not just with the ears, but with your entire being to these words of the Buddha, with great gratitude to Alawaka Yaka. Ewan me sutam, thus have I heard. At one time, the Buddha was staying near Alawi in the haunt of the native spirit Alawaka. Then the native spirit Alawaka went up to the Buddha and said to him, "Get out, ascetic." Saying, "All right, sir," the Buddha went out. "Get in, ascetic." Saying, "All right, sir," the Buddha went in. And for a second time, the native spirit Alawaka said to the Buddha, "Get out, ascetic." Saying, "All right, sir," the Buddha went out. "Get in, ascetic." Saying, "All right, sir," the Buddha went in. And for the third time, the native spirit Alawaka said to the Buddha, "Get out, ascetic." Saying, "All right, sir," the Buddha went out. "Get in, ascetic." Saying, "All right, sir," the Buddha went in. And for the fourth time, the native spirit Alawaka said to the Buddha, "Get out, ascetic." "No, sir, I won't get out. Do what you must." "I'll ask you a question, ascetic. If you don't answer me, I'll drive you insane or explode your heart or grab you by the feet and throw you to the far shore of the Ganges." I don't see anyone in this world with its gods, Maras and Brahmas, this population with its ascetics and Brahmins, its gods and humans, who could do that to me. But anyway, ask what you wish. What's a person's best wealth? What brings happiness when practiced well? What's the sweetest taste of all? The one they say has the best life. How do they live? Faith here is a person's best wealth. The teaching brings happiness when practiced well. Truth is the sweetest taste of all. The one they say has the best life lives by wisdom. How do you cross the flood? How do you cross the deluge? How do you get over suffering? How do you get purified? By faith, you cross the flood, and by diligence, the deluge. By energy, you get past suffering, and you're purified by wisdom. And so Alawaka goes on. How do you get wisdom? How do you earn wealth? How do you get a good reputation? How do you hold on to friends? How do the departed not grieve when passing from this world to the next? One who is diligent and discerning gains wisdom by wanting to learn, having faith in the perfected ones and the teaching for becoming extinguished, for Nibbana. Being responsible, acting appropriately, and working hard, you earn wealth. Truthfulness wins you a good reputation. You hold on to friends by giving. That's how the departed do not grieve when passing from this world to the next. A faithful householder who has these four qualities does not grieve after passing away. Truth, principle, steadfastness, and generosity. That is Satya, truth, Dhamma, principle, Ditti, steadfastness, and Chaga, generosity. Go ahead, ask others as well. There are many ascetics and Brahmins. See whether anything better is found than truth, self-control, generosity, and patience. And Alavaka says, why now would I question the many ascetics and Brahmins? Today I understand what's good for the next life. It was truly for my benefit that the Buddha came to stay at Alawi. Today I understand where a gift is very fruitful. I myself will journey village to village, town to town, paying homage to the Buddha and the natural excellence of the teaching. Ewan. So thank you so much, friends. I see that there are a couple more questions. I'm so sorry that we're out of time, but please bring them again to the monk chat, or to, probably monk chat is the best place to bring them. Please do that. Monk chat is tomorrow evening, Friday evening. So hopefully we'll see you then. All good wishes for your practice.